Come closer to the fire. Cities remember in sidewalks, not statues. In Buffalo, New York, there's an old bus stop where the route was cancelled back in '79. Schedules moved on. The buses did too. But most nights around the same time, there's still a woman standing there, waiting for a ride that no longer exists.
On the latest map of Buffalo's bus system, there is no Route 12 Kensington Riverfront. The glossy diagrams stop 2 neighborhoods short and send riders along different colored lines, newer names, more sensible loops. But if you stand on the corner of Hertel and Parkhurst under a streetlight that hums like it still remembers the 70s, you'll see a metal pole with 3 bolts where a sign used to be. You'll also see her. Most evenings around 10:45, as long as the sidewalks aren't a sheet of glass, a woman in a dark wool coat and a blue hat stands by that pole. She keeps one gloved hand on her purse strap and the other wrapped around a folded paper, the shape of a schedule, though no schedule lists this stop anymore. Sometimes she looks up the street toward where the bus would turn the corner if Route 12 still existed. Sometimes she stares at the pavement as if listening for a vibration that never arrives. Drivers notice her because she doesn't behave like the usual loiterers. No cigarettes, no headphones, no scrolling glow. Just waiting, steady, almost formal. On the coldest nights, when breath turns into small ghosts and the wind explodes off the river, she's still there, shoulders tight, feet set, the way commuters set them, ready to step off the curb at the first growl of an engine. The route was officially canceled in 1979. The memo lives in a manila folder in the Transit Authority archives. Low ridership, budget cuts, reconfigured service. The stop at Hertel and Parkhurst has no code in the system anymore. On paper, it doesn't exist. But the corner didn't get the memo. And neither did she. The story reaches me through a man named Omar, a night shift driver who has spent 20 years learning how Buffalo looks at 11 p.m. from behind a windshield. He's not a storyteller by nature. He counts time in loops and layovers, not in anecdotes. But he talked about her like you talk about a landmark you never agreed to. She's not there every night, he said, just enough that you think you imagine the ones she missed. Omar's route runs parallel to where the old 12 used to go. He turns 3 blocks early, heads for a transfer hub the planners built in the 90s, when they realized people like corners with more light and less wind. But a few times a month, detours take him past the old stop. Water main breaks, fire crews, the city's usual improvisations. The first time he noticed her, it was late January. Snow piled against the curb in tired ridges. Salt had turned the road into a map of quick decisions. He was crawling along at 20, watching for the kind of spin-out that takes a whole shift to forget, when his headlights caught a figure by the old pole. A woman, alone, hat pulled low, coat zipped to the throat, the posture of someone whose warmth depends on not wasting motion. She wasn't flagging him down. Route numbers were printed in big white LED on the front of the bus. 32 Broadway. Wrong color, wrong line. She just turned her head slightly as he approached, not quite looking at him, not quite away. A reflex, maybe. The way you look when you're sure your bus is next, not this one. He thought she'd walked out from one of the houses lining the block, maybe to meet a ride. But when he glanced in the side mirror a second later, she was standing exactly as before. No phone, no key in hand, just waiting. After the third or fourth detour that passed the same corner, he timed it. 10:46 p.m., 10:49, 10:44, always within 10 minutes of 10:45. Sometimes the coat was buttoned higher. Sometimes the hat had a new pin. But the posture didn't change. "You ever stop?" I asked him. He shook his head when he told me this, sitting in the depot break room with a paper cup of coffee he'd stopped drinking 10 minutes earlier. "It's not my stop," he said, "and you don't just open doors in the middle of nowhere anymore. Cameras, policies, besides." He let the thought trail. Besides what? Besides the fact that she didn't look lost? That she looked exactly like someone who knew where she was supposed to be? He started calling her the Kensington lady in his head, even though Kensington Avenue was blocks away. She belonged to a line that no longer ran, and the mind clings to details where it can. Transit systems keep better records than most families. A few months after hearing Omar's story, I sat in the Buffalo Transit Authority's archive room, a fluorescent box in a building that smelled of wet coats and old copier toner. A clerk named Denise, who had the efficient kindness of someone used to helping people find the wrong form, rolled out a metal cart loaded with binders. "You're lucky we kept the 70s, she said, dropping a stack in front of me. "Half of this stuff should have gone to storage, but nobody wanted to pay for boxes." Route 12. Kensington Riverfront had its own section. Schedules printed on paper the color of weak tea. Hand-drawn maps with neat little circles where stops once lived. Ridership tables with shaky pen lines trending down, then down some more. The stop at Hertel and Parkhurst was just another black dot, coded HP12 in small letters. Letters from that era told the usual shrinking city story. Factories closing, people moving to the suburbs where the buses didn't follow. The tax base eroding like snow under a March sun. A memo from 1978 proposed cutting the 12 on weekdays and rerouting riders to the 18 and the 9. The number of people boarding at HP12 was listed. 4 on an average day, down from 16 a decade earlier. On the cancellation form from early '79, a line near the bottom read, "All signage to be removed by June 1st. Someone had initialed it. Another hand had scribbled in the margin. "Post at Hertel/Parkhurst, stuck in concrete. Leave for now." Denise found passenger complaint logs from the following winter. Most were ordinary. Late buses, rude drivers, a broken heater. But one, in looping cursive, stood out. "To whom it may concern, your driver on the 18 refused to stop at the old 12, stop on Hertel, though there was a lady waiting. She's there every night. Somebody should tell her the route's gone. It isn't right letting her stand there." No response was attached. Maybe someone wrote back. Maybe nobody did. Paper doesn't always confess. I looked up. Denise was watching me with an expression halfway between curiosity and weariness. "You found your ghost yet?" she asked. "She's not a ghost," I said. She shrugged. "Then she's a habit. Those are harder to fix. You can tell a lot about a city by what it lets stay in place. Hertel and Parkhurst isn't beautiful. The corner has a small grocery that used to be a bigger one. A brick 4-unit where paint peels in sheets, and an auto repair shop that looks closed even when it's open. The bus pole stands a few feet from a tree that learned the hard way about salt. In summer, the leaves almost cover the metal. In winter, The pole looks like a punctuation mark at the end of a shrub. Neighbors have gotten used to her. The grocery owner, an older man from Utica who has seen enough things not to catalog them all, told me he used to think she worked nights. She'd be there in the coat, he said, restocking a shelf with cans. Always alone. Sometimes she'd glance at the store like she was thinking about coming in, but she never did. Couple winters ago, I left the door open a little longer when she was there, so she'd smell the heat. He smiled, a small, defeated expression. Didn't matter. Her ride's outside, not in here. A kid who grew up on that block, now a grown woman working at the DMV, remembers her from childhood. My brother said she was waiting for her husband, she told me. Like some soldier who never came back, you know? But my mom said, knock that off. That man probably just changed buses and moved on. I believed my brother. There are stories like that in every neighborhood. The woman at the window, the man on the bench, the guy who walks his dog at the same time every night, even after the dog is gone. The Kensington lady could have been one more. Except, in 1993, the city replaced the streetlights on that block. The old sodium lamps, which colored everything the shade of tired tea, gave way to newer, whiter ones. In the photograph taken for the upgrade report, you can see the corner clearly. The pole, the tree, a dusting of snow, and a woman in a dark coat and blue hat, blurred slightly by motion. She faces away from the camera toward where the bus would arrive. In a photo from 2007, used for a sidewalk repair grant application, the same corner appears. Different tree. Storms had knocked the old one down. Different storefront in the background. The quality of the picture is better, sharper. The bus pole's sign is gone, bolts rusting where it once attached. And there, near the curb line, stands a woman in a dark coat and blue hat, a little smaller, but with the same tilt of the head, same way of holding a bag close to the chest. You can explain it. Different women, similar clothes, coincidence, urban folklore layering faces on shapes. The brain loves patterns. It will make them out of stains. But you look at the pictures side by side long enough, and your shoulders do that thing. Shoulders do when they learn something before the mind agrees. The corner began to feel less like part of the city's geography and more like part of its calendar. Every night she stood there, the city was quietly reminded of a line it had removed. Eventually, someone tried to tidy it. Cities do that. They get embarrassed by reminders of old systems. The decision came from a planning initiative with a clean font and an optimistic brochure. Modernize streetscapes, remove visual clutter, update wayfinding. The old bus pole at Hertel and Parkhurst showed up on a list of things to go. No sign, no route, no need. A crew came on a Wednesday morning in February. 2 guys in orange vests with a hydraulic saw and a flatbed truck. The sidewalks were crusted with ice. The sky had that low, steel look that makes you think of lived-in radiators. They cut the pole at the base. The metal groaned a little, then leaned into the sound. They loaded it with other scrap. Bent rails, broken benches, a newspaper box that hadn't seen a quarter in 10 years. That night, the woman stood where the pole had been. There was nothing to lean on now, nothing to mark the stop but a darker circle in the concrete and a memory in a few heads. She kept the same posture, the same glance up the street at the same intervals. One neighbor, watching from a living room window with the TV volume low and the lights off, said it looked almost respectful. like she was honoring where the pole used to be. The next week, snow filled in the circle on the sidewalk. Drivers on detours still saw her. Omar passed by and had that weird sensation of missing something in a landscape you don't really own. He noticed her hat first, then the missing pole, then the spot where his bus would have stopped in another life. He thought, not for the first time, about breaking protocol, about opening the doors and calling out, "You know this route is gone, right? You know nobody's coming?" He didn't. The light turned green. The rules, written and unwritten, pulled him forward. On maps and spreadsheets and planning charts, the corner became officially neutral. No transit symbol, no service. On the ground, in winter air that tasted like pennies, a woman still stood at 10:45, waiting for a piece of the city had decided not to be anymore. Of all the people who saw her over the years, the only one I know who actually spoke to her was a parking enforcement officer named Tessa. 28, practical, the kind of person who has heard every excuse and come to respect none of them. She'd seen the woman for months on her late evening rounds and filed her under harmless fixture. Then, one March night, when snow was melting into gray rivers along the curb and discarded Christmas trees leaned against garbage bins like exiled relatives, she decided to break the invisible line. "I was cold and bored and tired of tickets," she told me, stirring sugar into tea in her small apartment. And she searched for the word. She looked like a question nobody was answering. Tessa crossed the street, boots slapping, vest catching headlight glare. Up close, the woman looked older than from the driver's seat, but not fragile. Lines at the mouth, not the eyes. Skin the light brown of someone whose grandparents had crossed an ocean for manufacturing work. The coat was thick, the kind you buy once and mend forever. The hat, up close, was navy with a small embroidered bus logo, faded. "Cold night," Tessa said, because that's how you start anything in that city from October to April. The woman nodded once, eyes still on the street. "They're late," she said. "Who?" Tessa asked, though she knew. 12 Kensington, the woman said. "It comes at 11. It's never this late." Tessa felt something like a draft behind her ribs. "That route's gone," she said, gently as she could. "Has been for a long time." The woman's brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in the effort of someone adjusting for unexpected information. The way you correct a recipe when you realize the oven runs hot. She looked at Tessa for the first time, really looked. Face, badge, reflective strips, and then down at the folded paper in her hand. It wasn't a modern tri-fold schedule. It was a yellowed strip, soft at the creases. The ink nearly vanished. When she unfolded it, Tessa could see the grid. Kensington Riverfront, 1978, printed in small letters in the corner. "They keep saying that," the woman said quietly, almost to herself. "Routes change, numbers move, but you stand where you're supposed to, and the bus comes. That's the agreement." The way she said it mattered. Not stubborn, not delusional, just faithful. Tessa thought about offering a ride home. She thought about asking where that was. She thought about a dozen things that would have turned the moment into something it wasn't built for. In the end, she just said, "There are other lines that go downtown now. You can catch the 18 on Elmwood." The woman smiled a little, the kind of smile you give a child who suggests you move the ocean. "This is my stop," she said. If it comes here. A bus rumbled in the distance. Another route, another color, another story. The woman turned her head, hopeful, then let it pass. When Tessa looked back at her schedule, the paper seemed almost translucent. "I have to finish my shift," Tessa said. "Of course," the woman replied. "We all have to." Tessa crossed back to her side of the street. She checked one illegally parked car, then decided to let it go. When she turned around again, the woman was still there, in the same spot, watching the line of streetlights lead off toward a system that no longer included her. Cities are full of things left standing after their reason is gone. Phone booths with no phones, tracks with no trains, exits with no building behind them, a bus stop with no bus. Years move. Snowplows nick the curb. Kids tag the brick wall behind the corner store and grow up enough to shake their heads when they see it 10 years later. The transit authority rebrands, then rebrands again. New fonts, new slogans about connection and mobility. The woman keeps her appointment more often than not. There are gaps, winters where neighbors don't see her for months, springs where she appears 3 nights in a row. She seems older in some years, then exactly the same the next. It may be different women, the mind says. It may be a story the street is telling a new listener each decade. But the hat stays blue, the coat stays thick, and the weight of attention she gives the empty air at the top of the block stays exactly the weight of someone expecting to step up into a bus when it arrives. Transit planners talk about ghost lines sometimes, desire paths on maps where people keep traveling mentally even after the service ends. The Kensington lady is one of those, drawn not in ink, but in the set of her shoulders against the wind. Omar still drives. On rare nights, detours take him past Hurtle and Parkhurst, and when they do, he eases off the accelerator by a mile or two without admitting that's what he's doing. He glances at the corner, looking for a dark coat, a blue hat, the posture of someone in between work and home. Sometimes he sees her, sometimes he doesn't. Both experiences feel equally strange. Mara's counterpart at the post office has her own ledger now, different in subject, but similar in intent. She tracks which routes people complain about, which corners people still mention, even when nothing official stops there. Hurtle and Parkhurst comes up in conversation more often than the schedule justifies. People still say, you know, they used to run a bus through there. I caught it to my first job. The map on the wall no longer shows it. The mind does. I visited the corner on a mild October night, the kind Buffalo exports to postcards and hoards for memory. The air smelled faintly of leaves moving toward their next job. Cars hissed past on their way to somewhere more urgent than this. At 10:40, the corner was empty. At 10:47, so was it. At 10:52, a woman in a wool coat and blue hat rounded the block, not hurrying, not slow, the pace of someone whose timing has been calibrated years ago. She took her place by the scarred circle in the sidewalk where the pole used to stand. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. She tilted her head toward the top of the street. For a moment, just long enough to be both ridiculous and true, I almost expected a bus to appear. Old livery, old number, headlights cutting through a weather that belonged to another decade. It didn't, of course. A delivery truck rolled by instead, music leaking from the cab. Driver thinking about something else entirely. The woman waited. She looked up at the passing truck, then past it, as if the real arrival was running behind. After a while, she checked a watch that might have been broken or might have known more than mine. Then she stayed. I didn't cross the street. Some stories don't need another interview. I just stood under my own streetlight, hands in my pockets, breath showing a little in the air, and realized I was doing the same thing she was, waiting for something that officially wasn't coming anymore.
The bus companies redraw their maps. Routes get cut, symbols vanish, poles come down. But somewhere in Buffalo, a woman in a blue hat still stands on a corner that lost its number in 1979, keeping time for a line the city erased. If you ever pass her, don't point a camera. Just notice the stop that isn't a stop, the way the air leans forward a little, as if it remembers the sound of brakes and doors and tired shoes stepping up. Some journeys end on paper, others keep a spot on the sidewalk just in case.